All right, let's give it a minute for people to join. Uh, let's see. If we actually get 1,000 people, it might break Zoom. I don't know how this works, but
Don't get your hopes up, Immad. A thousand
dude, we're at
people.
83 right now.
I got 83 people.
we got Justin Kane who's gonna bring in the
Everybody wants the
audience.
secret. They all want the secret.
Did you guys ever watch that movie, The Secret? Uh, I feel like before I was an entrepreneur, there's all of these like somewhat like kind of lame things that like were like weirdly inspirational, but like in hindsight seem lame. Like The Secret, the 4 Hour Work Week, Rich Dad Poor Dad. I think they all like kind of like made me think like I want to be an entrepreneur, but like in hindsight they kind of seem a little lame.
Yeah, the movie that inspired me to be an entrepreneur?
Was that?
Office Space. I was like, I can't.
That's why you're in an office right now.
I thought it was a comedy. I thought it was a documentary. I was like, holy shit, spend my whole life doing this. I can't do this.
He's living his dream now.
Exactly.
Where's your fax machine behind you there? Because
these guys are giving me shit for being in an office. All right. That's the cross I will carry. That's
all right. So people are still joining, but I think we can probably just get started and more people will join and we can catch up. So pretty excited about conversation today. I've got Justin Khan with us and Qasar Younis. We're going to be talking about kind of like preparing for YC interviews, but yeah, I think that's mostly very similar to what you do to prepare to talk to any investor. Justin Khan was a YC partner from 2014 to 2017. Before then, he was a founder of Justin.tv, which became Twitch and SocialCam. He also did exec somewhere around there. I'm not sure if it was before or after. And then
let's just not go through my entire failed misadventures, please.
And now he's an active investor at is it Goat Capital or is it Goat VC?
It's really not that hard to remember.
Just go
Capital.
All right, and then we also have Qasar Younis. He did YC from 2014 to 2016-ish. He did a YC company before then called Talkpin, which was acquired by Google, and now he's doing Applied Intuition, which is a unicorn startup in the kind of tools for kind of self-driving cars space. And I'm probably butchering the description there because
better than Justin's. So
yeah. So I'm the founder of Mercury. I was a YC part-time partner briefly in 2016 and 17, and I did YC in 2007 and 2009. But these guys obviously have a ton more experience than me interviewing YC founders. So yeah, I think one thing that people don't always understand is like the mindset of a YC partner when they're going through like these tons of like back-to-back interviews. I'd love for you guys to just talk about that a little bit. Like, how, like, what are you thinking? Like, what's going through your head when you're like talking to these potential YC founders?
We're thinking like, oh my God, I'm tired. And then like, what's for lunch? I mean, now that it's distributed, I'm not really sure, but we used to cater really good lunch. You remember that, Qasar? It was like, It's delightful. And so like there was just this, man, I wonder what's for lunch today. It's probably gonna be fucking great.
I mean, that's really truthful.
Sorry,
I think you're listening to probably think Justin's kidding, but I mean, it's grueling on the partner side. You're basically going through interview after interview after interview, and they all kind of blend together. And I think having that perspective is important because when you come in, you have to be pretty direct. If you try to be pretty flowery with the language or, I don't know, not direct, it becomes no one follows you, and it's basically a default no.
It's basically people are trying to get. I mean, you're trying to get to the point like after like the third interview, you're like, oh my God, I've got like more day. I don't know what they're doing now, but before it was like 6 days of this right across 2 weeks, or 7, or maybe it was 8 days across 2 weeks. Full days where we'd probably be there for like 12 hours. And it was like, oh my God, I got to get through this. And so you're just trying to dig in to what's the point of this startup, like without any pretenses, any niceties, any bullshit. You're just trying to dig in and understand that as quickly as possible so you can make a decision.
Does it help if someone's like flowery and like preppy and excited, or like you just don't want any of that? You just
Well,
want to
no, you want people who are enthusiastic, right? You're like trying to understand who the founders are. So obviously someone who has enthusiasm and confidence is, really exciting. And like, you want to be excited. Yeah, like when you invest in a company, you want to fall in love with that company and the founders, right? So it helps, like you want them to be really enthusiastic about what they're doing.
Yeah.
But we just want to be able to understand it. Like a lot of people make a lot of assumptions on like what's understandable. They like come in and they start using jargon about like what their thing is, or they don't like really set up context for like, you want to explain it like the people across from you have no context and are probably partially brain dead, because they might be. And so
yeah, I think also what happens is founders feel like they have to paint this really grandiose picture, and they use jargon and they use all these words that are actually make it really hard to understand what they're doing. So the most important first advice is make sure you only have 10 minutes. You got to get across what you do in the first few sentences. I remember in our interview in 2010, PG about halfway into the interview was like, YC was obviously quite different at the time. It was only the 4 or 5 partners that worked there. And he said, I don't know what you guys do. 4 or 5 minutes in, and we were like, oh shit, we really are messing this up. So I said, oh, let me take it all the way back. And just from a user's perspective, this is an app that you download on your smartphone that you can send a message to businesses. And he said, okay, got it. Why wouldn't you do this in texting? I said, oh, you can actually do it with texting. But I think that your instinct is, I got to pitch this $10 billion company. And let me try to like shove all these adjectives into this initial sentence. And that is actually really wrong. What your instinct should be when you walk into that room is be very perceptive of how much the partners know about your company, where the misunderstanding is, and get that clarified in the first couple of minutes before you start talking about a much larger vision.
And that's why this guy's got Mark Andreessen and Immad on his board.
Very complimentary. That's also very helpful.
I think like sometimes this part's tricky because people are like, okay, I need to paint this $10 billion vision, but I need it to be like very easy and understandable. Like you download the app, you message a business, and like that's it. So how do you paint both those pictures? Like how do you paint this like really long term? Like this is gonna
no one's gonna believe your like $10 billion vision unless they believe you have something that works for some set of people. That's it's a very simple and powerful idea to explain and understand, right? So you have to like explain the super simple idea, be like, here's what works, and here's what's working, here's how we're gonna grow it, here's what audience it applies to, or like who's the customer of the product. And then from there, once they really believe that, then you're kind of saying, well, like if you believe these things and like we keep going, then it can become this thing, but you really don't want to even talk about that until they're like enthusiastic about your existing thing.
Yeah. I think we touched on like too many adjectives and like being vague. Like what are other kind of red flags where, if people did X, you found that like very off-putting?
Like defensiveness. That's like the instant death. Like if you get super defensive, sometimes people are, we ask a lot of questions and we'd be like, why did you decide to do it this way? Or like, why is this important? And then sometimes people just get super defensive and you're like, there's a couple reasons why that doesn't work. One, it's like, it's not convincing. It makes you seem like intellectually weak because you're not like willing to, explore the idea maze of things that would be scary to you. And then the third thing, most important, is like, life's short. I don't want to work with someone like that, where I'm going to bring up an idea or ask a question. They're going to be like, that's stupid. Or like, it's just, so it's like an instant death.
It highlights insecurity actually. When somebody's like, well, why are you asking me that question? It's like, well, I'm asking that question because we want to see if we want to buy a part of this company. I remember I had somebody I knew who interviewed at YC, and they said, oh, the interview was going bad from the beginning because when I walked in, they were laughing. I was like, I'm 100% positive they were not laughing at you. They were probably laughing at like 50 other things. And there's like, it really threw me off my rhythm because I thought they were laughing at my idea or something. I was like, no, they literally don't care about you.
Oh my God.
It's, you know, they're scrambling to read the application as you walk from the door to the chair, of like, what is this, and not to embarrass themselves. So it really is. Yeah, I think so. Defensiveness, I think, is one of it. I think being, maybe the other extreme is people try to play into cliches of what they think an interview should be. Like either it's trying to be very memorable, or trying to be quite aggressive, or trying to be showy. You're just trying to communicate what you're working on to 2 or 3 or 4 other people. So just drop the pretension and try to be authentic in that very short moment. And I get it. It's a very intense moment because it can change your life, and you have to somehow be able to put that to the side. I remember asking, I forgot who we were talking to. Maybe it was PG, actually. This is before I was a full-time partner, about should we be over indexing on the presentation in 10 minutes? And they said, well, they're gonna have to go through intense meetings like this the rest of their life with other investors, with big customers, with press. So if they can't handle the 10 minutes here, they're probably not gonna be able to handle the 10 minutes in the future. And I thought that was very insightful. So you have to somehow recognize it's a big deal, but it's also not a big deal. And because if you don't get across, you know, your authentic self, then it's going to, you know, people, yeah, like Justin said, people don't want to work with people who seem cagey or disingenuous.
Yeah, I think that's super important. Just be you. You know, like you're going to be the most confident if you're just yourself. And so don't try to be anything else. Just be you. Talk about your idea. You're the expert in your idea. Like you know more about it than any of the YC partners are going to. So just, you know, you just got to explain it calmly, simply. That's it. That's the only hack.
What about kind of things that you both perceived as like very positive things? Like, was there like sometimes after the 10 minutes, you're like, wow, this person did X or talked about Y, and that was the thing that really stood out. What are those kinds of things that stood out to you?
I think it's like Mark Andreessen calls it the idea maze, like, or I think that maybe from Bology. It's like you have understood, gone down all the different pathways, and like kind of, if I bring up something, you're like, yeah, we thought about that. It's a great idea. It's on a roadmap. Or like, no, we tested that and it's like not, you know, we don't think it's going to work for X, Y, and Z reasons. You know, it could be whatever answer, but like understanding that you've thought through this, like all the pathways around your business. Somewhat like if you know your numbers, right? Like, so we're confident that you're iterating based on like metrics. You have like a plan. Like it doesn't have to be going perfectly, but you could be like, hey, this, you know, yeah, the retention is not good, but here's like 5 things that we're going to do for, you know, to build our retention or whatever. Like, so just understanding that those things, you know, we're really evaluating the founders. Like the interview is about your business, but it's not really about where your business is at right now, because almost all the business are fucking terrible. So it's like really about like the founders, and are you going to be the type of people who are going to create a business that's valuable, and like, are you on the right trajectory? And so those are all the questions about the business are really questions for you to demonstrate that you're the type of person who can do that.
Yeah, to take the Justin's analogy that all the companies are dog shit at that stage. Imagine if the partners are walking through a junkyard and all the founders are standing next to a junky car, and you're just trying to evaluate, can these people fix this piece of shit up to get down the road? and everybody's like, nah, I got 4 wheels. It's like, yeah, we get it. You got 4 wheels. The other guy has 3 wheels. I get that. But we're trying to evaluate more than the very, you know, deformed idea that you have. I think also in terms of things that stand out, sometimes the partners have already seen the idea fail. It's almost inevitable at YC. You see so much volume. So if the founder has good answers to obvious issues, you learn something as a partner, and when you learn something, that sticks with you. That's memorable.
Yeah.
And you can't fake learning something in the sense of like all the obvious things are already learned, because you're just dealing with this flood of data, which is tons of applications, tons of founders, tons of ideas. One of the misconceptions that founders have about YC partners, quote unquote, knowing something, and I remember when I was a founder, when Justin said about, you know more about your business than the partners do, that didn't quite resonate with me, because I thought, well, they always seem to know a lot. What they seem to know actually is they know the pattern. They actually don't know the business, and those are 2 different things. So they they kind of know where the obvious pitfalls for your type of business is going to be. But specifically your business and the market you're pursuing with the skills that you bring to the table, they don't know those things. So sometimes you have to remind them and say like, oh, well, actually I worked in, whatever, social media, I worked in online advertising, or I worked in autonomous vehicles, or whatever it is. And that gives you a bit more authority to somebody who's actually just looking at patterns and matching patterns. And because the previous pattern might be somebody that didn't know the space that was attacking the space. So, and then I think like the other kind of memorable stuff, at the highest level, I think about like interviews like Checker, companies that have done really well. GitLab just went public last week or the week before. I remember very, very clearly thinking, oh, this is like a no-brainer. And that concept, it's hard to break that concept down to what gets you to the no-brainer view, but it's usually like, oh, I see why these 2 or 3 people are working on this space. It fits their personality, it fits their technical experience, it fits their ambition, and the space looks like it's a big space to work in. And today is the big space to work in, not 2 years from now, not 2 years ago. When all that makes sense, it becomes much more of an easy yes. And yeah, some of the best companies were the easiest yeses. I mean, it wasn't like a heavily debated. Not saying every company's like that, but I think that was a little bit of a hallmark.
Yeah, to piggyback on that, I think it ties into learning something, like, and you have the opportunity and ability to like set that up for people. I remember Parker Conrad's interview. He's Rippling unicorn company, second one. This is his interview for Zenefits. He was like, "Here's how health insurance works in companies," right? Like we don't really, none of us really knew or were like experts, but he kind of set up like, here's the problem and then here's my solution, right? And so, he spent a lot of time actually talking about like the way things work today so that we could like learn something and then like learn why, oh, this is like a very obvious solution and he's like gonna crush it, and then it was a very easy yes to make.
Yeah, I think if there's a tone, by the way, you could, nothing is one size fits all. So please take this advice with like, extreme, skepticism. But one tone that fits really well that I remember from Parker's Zenefits interview was that it's aggressive, but a certain level of humbleness. It's not aggressive obnoxiousness, and it's not meekness, but it's aggressiveness. And you're like, man, this person is just going to plow through these obstacles, because it just seems inevitable. And I think it's hard to, like I said, be careful with that advice, but if you can strike that tone, that's very powerful.
Yeah, it's kind of like excited to share something with you. Like I discovered this thing and I'm really excited, and like I'm excited to share it with you.
But how can you be humble yet confident? Like I think sometimes people don't understand how to like pull that off.
It's like, hey, I might be wrong, but like I think this is how the world works, and I've discovered this thing, and here's a bunch of evidence, and like, I could be wrong, and I'm open to new ideas, but like, it seems to be working.
Yeah, exactly. It's knowing where the weaknesses on the structure are, acknowledging those weaknesses, and having a plan to address those weaknesses. Not everything's going to be solved, ever. No. So if you're trying to present this image that everything is fine and it's solved, and you should invest in this, pristine thing, that it's just false. And then everybody knows that on the other side. So then they become very skeptical about the other things you're saying.
Yeah, that makes sense. You've both been investors after you finish your YC partner experience. Have you found that as an investor, you're kind of thinking in a different mindset from a YC partner who's interviewing companies, or is it a pretty similar kind of process?
I mean, what I think is, holy shit, YC makes so much money.
You want to get the same valuations.
Yeah, it's like, wow, that is a money-making machine. Our office is literally right next door to YC on Pioneer. It's like I can see YC from here, and every day I just think I can hear the printing presses humming.
Now it's not even in there. It's fully distributed. So you can be a YC partner from your underwear in Spain.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the joke I used to make about Google is, Google doesn't have printing presses because even printing presses are an ineffective way to print money. I mean, Google, they have to buy printers and have to chop the money up. Google's actually way more effective in making money than actually buying printing presses. Same thing with Google. But the answer to how differently look at companies, when you're not looking at it in that very structured way, it is different. That's the unique thing about YC, both as a partner and as a founders. You go into a very regimented interview process and application process. Whereas when you're an independent investor, deals are coming to you in all different facets, and it's a very different mechanism. I don't think you're looking for fundamentally different things, but the process actually changes the way that you actually invest.
I do think that, it is pretty similar in that, like, I probably am 90% of the way there within 10 minutes of talking to someone. Like, if they can present their idea clearly and I'm like, this is a no, this is obvious, or like 90% out, right? Like in 10 minutes of talking to someone. And so, I think that first impression is incredibly important. And then, like, the difference is, like, with YC, we could just YOLO like a shit ton of companies. Whereas here, you're kind of like, fuck, I'm going to invest $1 million in this fucking thing. I don't, maybe I should actually see if their product works.
Yeah, that's exactly. If you really like a company as an independent investor, you can lean in. I'm not a full-time investor, so I'm not writing $1 billion checks like Goat VC, but it is in that sense similar. I think one thing that I would advise, regardless of what you do, is to go through the YC application. I think it's a fantastic framework in understanding your business. If you can answer all those questions, you're already in one big leg up.
Yeah. Is there, how much time does one spend on projections, market sizing? Like, you only have 10 minutes. Do you think that's important to like touch on, or better to just kind of leave it and focus on like the reality?
I mean, people think your projections are bullshit. So, like, if you're like, in 2025, we're going to make $1 billion, then we're going to be like, okay, yeah, great. Well, I love that enthusiasm. So, like, I mean, I would focus on what you can control. If you're like, hey, this year we're going to make $10 million because, we have, we're on this trajectory, then, like, that's maybe more credible.
I think the way to think about this mental framework is, don't go into the interview, or honestly, even any investor conversation, with like this boxing match mentality where you're going to land some punches. It's much more like jujitsu, where they're going to throw energy and you have to just manipulate that energy. So if you go in thinking, I got to get these projections out at some point, you're actually going to have this weird interaction, because you're trying to get these things, and their mental model is thinking about something very different. The way that one way to think about what you'll be asked about in an interview is, the partners generally are going to dive into what they think is the weakness, what doesn't make sense. And that's where the authenticity immediately gets tested, because partners have an uncanny ability to find the one small thing in the entire application, like, hey, I noticed that your co-founder isn't full-time. And that's like the first question. And it's like, oh shit, how did you know? It's like, well, I compared that on their LinkedIn. It says they're present at their job, and you just met them 6 months ago. Are they full-time? And then there's like, you have projections in your head. You're like, but we're gonna be doing $1 billion in revenue in 3 years.
Do you think sometimes partners do get focused on like, some weakness, which is like, maybe it's not actually a real weakness, or whatever, that's like a short time period? Like, do you try to, like, as a founder, move them out of that into your projections, or you're like, let's just like attack that weakness and like completely solve that question directly?
I think you just kind of not be defensive. Like, people get fixated with like, yo, you don't have a technical co-founder. How are you going to build this? Like, that's a very common run, right? And then people will, like, you just have to decide what your answer is and then go with it and be like, hey, we have, I've been an engineering manager, or I've been like building product with this like dev shop in Ukraine for the last like 5 years, and we've actually made a lot of product and it's working. So like, that's what our solution is, like, and just move on. I mean, you got to just like be confident in your answer and like have an answer.
Yeah, one thing to keep in mind on maybe a billboard, YC partners do not know what the fuck they are doing. So don't get too wound up in that, hey, they're harping on this thing. They might be harping on it because literally they funded a company in the last batch that had that problem, because they had a Ukraine dev shop and it didn't work out. So they're going to keep harping on it more and more. Don't over-index on that. Really just roll with the energy in the room and keep it positive. One reason, by the way, that another kind of heuristic to really think about is, when people don't know what they're talking about, when you're as a partner, you ask questions deeper and deeper, they get vaguer and vaguer. They become very vague about the answers. When people are real subject matter experts, if I ask Justin Khan, how do you maintain long hair? He's going to go down a rabbit hole. It's whereas if you ask me, I'm going to be like, you use shampoo.
Because how do you maintain that bald hair?
So there are these little tricks. So you should know your weaknesses, and you should be able to get to that next level of depth if they want to dig in. If you don't know it, you should just say like, that's a good point. I haven't really thought about that too deeply. This is kind of my knee-jerk reaction, and that might be wrong, but it's a knee-jerk reaction. So then they kind of know, but just know that the partners are not coming with like the answer, and they're comparing like the answer for your company to what you're saying. That's not the interaction. They're trying to learn.
Yeah. I've got a few tactical questions, and then maybe after that we can go through some audience questions. Let's say you get a YC interview, it's in 1 week. Like, what are the things that you do in that like 1 week to prepare?
Sorry,
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Please. Gentlemen first.
You should try to do mock interviews with people who've been through YC interviews. Nothing beats just getting your head ready for a 10-minute quick conversation with people who are calibrated. You have to be super careful because lots of people who've also gone through interviews, they might have been unsuccessful and they've taken away actually the wrong reasons that they were unsuccessful. So the ideal is, a YC partner, XYC partner, that's golden. And then below, everything is below that. So it's Immad@Mercury.com. Is that right?
I already get too many emails. It's probably Qasar@Applied.co or something.
No, you want to find somebody you can do mock interviews with. Obviously, read all the stuff that's online. YC has done there's so much information online about how to do a successful interview. The other tactical advice is have a Google Doc with all the obvious questions that are going to be asked. And then instead of having answers in prose or those paragraphs, just have 2 or 3 bullet points. And the reason I say 2 or 3 bullet points is you don't want to memorize answers, but you want to have those talking points at the front of your mind. And a real last thing is, I think before you go into the interview, what we did was helpful, was we were asking each other questions in the parking lot and in the waiting room. So our brains were just primed for certain subject matter. So you're not warming up in the interview. You're already kind of walking in with like that knowledge kind of at the front of in a kind of local cache rather than kind of trying to dig it up. I don't know.
Anything else, Justin?
No, that was very comprehensive.
All right. Like sometimes there's multiple founders. Like, should they really try to spend like an equal amount of time talking, or like
no, like it's like you just pick one person. Hopefully, he's the CEO who's gonna kind of be the first default person to answer questions, and then obviously they can route it to whoever. But like the worst is when you like clearly don't have consensus. And you're like, one person's saying one thing and the other person, someone else is saying like, no, that's not right. And like says something completely different. So, I think just routing things through one person is the way to go.
Yeah. We talked earlier about what's like dead on arrival. Dead on arrival is arguing in your YC interview. That is, I mean, if you're not on the same page, that's really bad. Imagine if you're a co-founder and the CEO says something you don't agree with. Man, you have to be super, super thoughtful if you're gonna interject there. I think you just let it go. And they go, yeah, that makes sense, and you move forward because it's more important for the rhythm. Now, if they're digging in and you have a clarification, then you jump in. I think the rough, the thing that you don't want to kind of communicate is the CEO is like this aggro, Harvard MBA type, and he's got like 2 monkey coders in a cage with him. And he's barking out all the answers, and then once in a while he shakes the cage and asks founders to speak.
Perform.
There's shockingly that kind of stuff happens. So you want to have that. Hey, these people clearly enjoy, being with each other. They clearly are friends. They're going to be able to go through some turbulence, and they just enjoy each other's company. That's a very positive sign. Because you're just going to go through shit and you got to really like the person on the other side.
Is there like a certain amount of time you should spend on an answer? Like, is it like do 20 seconds and then you're done? Like don't ramble on too much, or what is like the right
like
amount of time?
47 seconds.
47.
It's like, make sure you have that timer going in your back of your head. If you fuck it up, it's 48 seconds.
I'm more of a 49-second person, but
no, in all seriousness,
seriously, we're joking. We're joking.
Different levels of depth, right? Like you can go like very detailed on answer. You can be like,
no, you should just answer things in the simplest way possible to actually answer the question in a compelling way. Like, don't just drone on and on. Like, just answer something as simply as possible and then stop. Like, as long as it's a compelling answer,
Yeah, read the room. Read the room. If they're not paying attention, you're doing it wrong. You're going on for too long. So the default would be shorter answers because founders tend to, they know their space and they're really excited about it. They want to give long answers. But default should be short answers. Now I've seen the other side where it's like the question is, hey, so everyone's sitting down. It's like, oh, so you're doing alpaca farming software. So why did you get into this? And they're like, because it's our passion.
This is what we do.
All right, but why do alpaca farms need software? It's like, because they're inefficient. It's like, all right, we're playing tennis here. You got I mean, there's absolutely been times where I'm like, 10 minutes is way too long. So you read the room. If they're like surprised at how short their answers are and they're kind of stumbling to like get, the next question, go deeper into that thing. Look at them. This is the other thing is founders are going to be in their own head and they're almost not reading the body language across the table for them. Look at them, see are they engaged. If they're not engaged, pull back. If they're engaged, keep going. And then, but it's not an easy skill, but it's very doable.
Yeah. Any advice for people doing kind of second or third time YC interviews? Like, is that something that the YC partner is going to be aware of and like you should be aware of it, or just like kind of ignore it and think about it as like your first time every time?
I mean, I feel like you have like a huge advantage, right? Like you already did a company, they know you, like, I mean, assuming you didn't like steal money from the first company or something like that, it should be like, you'd say they should be rolling a ball downhill. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. Like if you can't get it.
I meant people who did not get into YC previously, but they're doing another.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. So they're going to be aware of how many times you applied to YC, but people don't like hold that unless it's been like 17 times. Like people don't hold that against, and that by that time you're probably not getting an interview. Like I think it's a lot of the good founders have came back a couple times because they didn't have the right idea, it wasn't the right fit. Maybe they hadn't people didn't believe in the idea until you've shown the sufficient amount of traction. So I wouldn't worry about it.
Agreed.
Cool. Let me try to hit up some of these audience questions. Johnny asks, how do YC partners avoid becoming jaded? I think that's a good question.
I don't think anyone's figured that out yet.
There's 3 XYC partners.
I'm not sure anyone's figured that out yet. I think making YC fully remote so you can literally work from anywhere in the world has helped. Like you can, I think some partners, I heard some partners, I won't put them on blast, like spent the entire batch in a beach in Europe this summer.
Like in all seriousness, like when how do you stay, like you've got 10 minutes, you're trying to stay optimistic. Maybe this is the 50th thing you've heard and like maybe the third time you pitch this thing. I think there's an inherent sense of fairness and like being like, okay, I want to give this person a shot and like think of questions, like be open to being like wrong about my assumptions, right? Like that's the mindset I would always come in, is like, it's only like what's fair is like I like clear out all my assumptions and just like have an open mind. And even if I'm tired or I've seen this startup before or whatever, and I think that's kind of my approach. And I think most people take something somewhere.
Yeah, I think that by and large, I mean, the YC partners are super positive and optimistic. They're not cynical. They're not negative. I mean, I think of like these, European VCs who are like, everything sucks and everything's going to fail. I think YC, they're some of the most positive and optimistic people in the investing game. So I don't think that's necessarily like a structural issue you have to worry about or think about. And also like, a vast majority of the YC partners have done their own companies. And so they know everything looks crappy early on. So they're not judging you on that. And they know that everything has a non-linear trajectory. They're not judging you on that. So there's a lot of empathy in the environment, which is like, yeah, we get it. One thing is for sure is I don't think YC partners are ever like arrogant about their views. At least I didn't see it. They're because they were founders and they just know like how shitty it is to sit on the other side, hat in hand, trying to raise money. Like that's a very humbling experience. And so I think I think YC's done a good job in being quite empathetic to founders. Yeah, I would say it's not jadedness; it's the pragmatic reality of the difficulties of starting a company and making sure that the founders have thought about those pragmatic issues, rather than like, oh, this will never work. I don't think I've ever heard of YC partners say this will never work. It's more just like, hey, they haven't thought this thing through, or maybe this is not the right team dynamic or something else.
Yeah, I think there's a few questions like this. Like, what happens if you're like a pre-traction startup? Is there like a bias against people who haven't launched, don't have users? Like, how do you handle that kind of like?
Yeah, I think what's most important is that you're making an appropriate amount of progress for however long you've been working on this thing. So if you've only been working on it for a month, like maybe you have a prototype or like a mock-up or something, or like even just a strong case. Well, hopefully you have like, but it's like, how are they moving quickly if given however much time they've been working on it, right? If you've been working on it for a year and you have nothing, then that's probably not a great sign,
Yeah, 100%.
Will YC invest in a competitor of an existing YC company? Like, should you not bother applying to YC if you're doing
this is the greatest. This is the greatest hack. Traditionally in Silicon Valley, people were like, okay, I'm going to back one of the horses in this race. YC is like, we're an institution, so we can back every horse in this race, and it would be wrong for us to deny any of these horses funding. So yes, YC will back your competitors, oftentimes in the same batch. It is how it is.
Zenefits and Zen Payroll, anybody?
Yeah,
those are at least 2 batches apart. There's actually like, I think 3 YC or maybe 4 YC companies doing FP&A, not this batch, like the previous batch.
Yeah, I mean, that's just the nature of large numbers. Absolutely. I just hope they're not in your same batch, because it makes it a pain in the ass to like differentiate. But that happens all the time. And YC doesn't. YC will back entire breeds of animals, not just a horse. They're like, we're taking the entire greyhound category.
I mean, I just like, don't get twisted about it. It's not personal.
Yeah, quite a few people asking like variety of questions around like metrics. Like, what are the metrics you should have handy? Like, is there is it MRR? Is it retention? Like, what are the metrics that like people are looking for?
I mean, you decide based on your business, right? It depends. You're an enterprise company or a consumer company, whatever. If you're a consumer company, it might be like, we have this many DAU, they make this many videos, they spend this much time on the site, or this, stuff like that, right? Well, here's the retention, the 1 month retention, 1 week retention, whatever. If you're a business company, it might be like, here's what our lead funnel looks like, here's what our like average contract value is, here's like the cost of sales, here's et cetera, like the things that make a difference for your company. So you kind of decide, but you have to like frame your metrics as important.
Yeah, I think the latter that I've always kept in my head, it doesn't apply. It applies more to enterprise companies than not, but is at the top of the, this is for all companies, all stages. Top of the ladder is profits. Below profits is revenue. Below revenue is long-term contracts or engagement that's recurring. Below that is any engagement or usage. Below that is, you have an idea that people are saying that they'll engage with. But below that,
employee headcount of your company.
Yeah. So
if we get down there, you're not getting in.
Yeah. At the stage at YC, it's a lot of the very common things. So it's not going to be anything too exotic. And if you're only like a couple months old, it's more about, do you have a grasp of the metrics you're going to be optimizing for?
Yeah.
I mean, basically, people just want to know what the fuck you're talking about and like are paying attention to something, right? So you're like, like when the problem is like when someone asks like, okay, how many, you have this consumer app, how many people are using it every day? And you're like, I don't know. And then like, how are you going to make that grow if you don't know? Like that's,
Or like a viewpoint on an obvious other player in the business, or it's kind of like if somebody can come up with a question in 10 minutes that you haven't thought of in a company you're supposed to be spending all of your time on, there's probably some mismatch there.
Yeah, it's a bad sign.
Yeah.
I think there's a few people who apply to YC and they're still in a job or they're still at school. Is that like a massive red flag that you haven't committed full time to your company? Or is that like, oh yeah, you can just say, when I get into YC, I'm going to go full time on this thing?
That's not compelling. When I get into it, I mean, all investors want to invest in something that's going to be successful without them. YC is not any different, Like if you're like, I'm going to quit my job when you fund my company, that's like, there's a lot of people out there who have already quit their jobs and they're like grinding themselves to death on their companies without like my funding yet. So, why? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's approach is a red flag. I think that it's a pretty big issue because if you can't make the commitment to the idea, why should YC?
Yeah.
If you're in school, it's easy. Here, someone asked, what about if you're in school? If you're in school, it's easy. Just be like, I'm taking a leave of absence and working on this startup. And you can always go back to school. Like you don't, in like 3 months or whatever. So there's like zero risk. It's not like quitting your job. You're going to figure out how you're going to pay your mortgage payments and feed your baby. Like you're in school, you're fine.
All right. Austin asks, effective framework to demonstrate how you're going to spend the money. Like, does that come up in YC? Like, do they ask like how you're going to spend this 100K?
No, I mean, there was one YC founder who went and YOLO'd it in Vegas, and like, probably if you're planning on doing that, don't do it. Or at least don't say it. Don't say it.
All right. I think people ask this, like, should you prepare a presentation? If you're a hardware startup, should we have a demo? Like anything like that?
I mean, don't prepare a presentation. Nobody wants to see it. They're gonna say me like, shut your laptop. Like, if you have a hardware demo, if it's fucking cool and it's gonna work, then yeah, bring your demo. If it's not gonna work or not guaranteed to work, or it's not that cool, don't bring it.
Yeah, it has to be objectively cool too. I've seen some people say like, I got this awesome demo, and they put this thing and it goes like, bzz, bzz, and it's like, okay, that's starting up. No, that was a demo. It's like, I'm sure that was difficult to do. I'm sure you spent a month to get this, this thing to do what you wanted it to do, but it's not immediately about. I remember, I mean, the early days of YC very much was demo oriented. But by that time, there's a big question of like, can you actually build this thing? Today, like building a website or building a web app, mobile app, if you can't do that, I mean, you have bigger problems, in terms of if you're trying to build a hard software company, those are table stakes.
What if it is a hardware company? Like, how do you demonstrate that you can build this thing?
Yeah, I mean, demonstrate, like showing it is great, but like sometimes like we're just going to use people's backgrounds, right, to like determine, we think this guy can build it, and you're getting the benefit of the doubt actually. The other thing is like, don't show a demo of something that just does something that exists already does, right? Like if it's just like, hey, I built this really great fitness band or whatever, and it just like fucking does what a million other fitness bands do, like you don't have to demo. Like it's only going to hurt you. If the point is like maybe you're building some sort of extra layer on top of it that does something cool or whatever, like you don't have to demo things that people already have innovated.
Yeah. What if there's, Tim Jones asked, what if there's a technical detail, proprietary information, you don't want to talk about it in the interview, but you asked a question about it?
You got to talk about it. They're trying to buy a part of the business. So if you say that's off the record, you're probably not going to get funded. I mean, that's the nature of all investors. Imagine if you were trying to buy a house. I said, well, you can't go into this room. It's like, wait, what's in that room? And it's like, it's proprietary, but you got to buy the house. It's like, it's like, wait. Like, what am I buying?
Because you got the best analogies, man.
I know. Wait. Can we respond to Lauren Solomon's comment that it's horrible advice to quit your job before your company can withstand the burden of your livelihood? And I agree, actually. Like, which is why starting a startup is not for most people, right? It is like it's a lot of risk to quit your job and like go do something that is not guaranteed to make any money ever. So you should really only do it if you can afford it. You have like some backup, it's not going to destroy you if it doesn't work out. But so like that's important. It's not, I'm not saying everybody should quit their job and start a startup. I'm actually saying most people, probably including most of the people in this audience, should not start a startup. You should just keep working at Google and get rich that way. It'll be great.
Yeah, there's something really strange about these types of conversations, because all three of us have been on the other side of starting companies, getting fucking just pummeled and punched in your face all the time, and just trying to pick up the pieces. And people are like, how can I enthusiastically get into this? It's like, okay, I'll give you the advice, but it's like it's a pretty rough experience, and you absolutely shouldn't be. This goes along with like friends and family rounds. There's a lot of professional investors out there. If you can't get a professional investor to invest in you, you probably shouldn't get your dad or your uncle who doesn't really understand the risks involved in a startup like this. Now, the way that I did it, I didn't have a family that could afford to bankroll me. I didn't have any of those advantages. And so I just saved up money. I worked at jobs that I didn't like, and I saved up money, and my mental model was I'm going to save up 1 year. And in 2009, that 1 year was 30 grand. I don't think you could survive on 30 grand in the Bay Area today. Now it's more like you need 2.5 million. But I had 30 grand, and I said, in this 1 year, if I got to put together a team, I got to get an idea, and I got to get funding. And if I can't do it in 12 months, I'm taking a job again. And that hard, and the reason you don't want to do, for me, it was 3 months or 6 months, was 3 months you're not even really trying. Like it takes you 3 months to just get out and warm up to being out there. At 6 months, and I think if you do it 6 months, it's kind of not enough time. But if you have a year's worth of like savings or ability to kind of fund you and your co-founders, then you might have enough time to really like, when you're 4 months into it, you're like, I really got to get this thing going, because it's not going to get, and this is the only shot I'm going to get in my life. This is going to be the one shot. I'm not going to do a 1 year off to start a company again. So it is a pretty serious endeavor. It's not like trivial. Yeah.
But I mean, just compare yourself to like if you are starting, it's not, it might not be fair for investors to ask, oh, you should like quit your job and take all the risk before I'm willing to invest. But you are competing in a market of all the startups, of the Qasars out there who are like out there being like, I saved up money. This is do or die for me. This is my one shot. I'm going to do it. Versus like somebody who's sitting on Facebook being like, well, I'm making like 300K a year or 500K or whatever. So like, I need to see some like comparable upside on the other, in my own startup before I'm going to commit to this. Like, I know who I'm going to write a check to. It is not going to be that guy.
Yeah. It is a lot easier than
that's another great way to get an auto no at YC is like, I'm at Facebook and I'm trying to figure out if I should, do the startup thing, because what'll be like more financially optimal. It's like, well, we'll make it easy for you. You're not going to be doing YCs. And we say this kind of jokingly, but I mean, Justin's exactly right. I mean, it's a competitive market, and you're competing for investor dollars. That's just a reality. It's just like when you go to the grocery store, you're buying stuff that's comparable to each other. You're not going to buy the thing that's obviously not as good.
Yeah. How much context do YC partners have about your application? Like, should you assume they've read it all, they know exactly what you're doing, or should you assume they've read none of it?
I think it's highly variant. So it's like sometimes people reading, they've read it really thoroughly. Oftentimes that hasn't been the case. Sometimes they're like looking around, like on App Annie, to like verify, like, did you say you're downloaded this much, but is your download trend going a certain way? Or they're looking at LinkedIn, like Qasar said, to see like, are you still working on your job or whatever, so they're just like kind of Googling the internet about you and about your startup and trying to understand it more, So it might be like the information is like, some of it comes from what's in your application, but some of it might come from like other sources, or there's their knowledge of the industry.
Yeah, and you can sometimes randomly get situations where a partner really knows your space, and there's no indication they would know your space from their background, and they're gonna actually really know your application in and out. That can be super positive because they're legitimately already excited. And if your idea is actually good, you might have a pretty soft yes already walking in. But I would say that Justin's answer is correct. It's highly variegated. That at the least, they will have skimmed the application. That's the least. And at the most, they've read it in some detail and have some, a couple of short notes on it, a couple of bullet points to ask you.
I think there's lots of this question is already available on the internet, but I'll ask you guys anyway. Is there like a top 1, 2, 3 questions that like every YC interview has and you should definitely prepare for?
Like, what does your thing do? What does your thing do? Why are you working on this? What's the traction look like?
Yeah, the what does your thing do is a great warm-up question. It's like a softball. You're sitting down. What does your thing do? If you can't knock that and hit that, ball on bat, then maybe the rest of it might be a little more difficult. And YC partners are generally, they're not trying to do gotcha questions. They're just trying to learn. So I think the for your business, it's going to be, where are the biggest, most obvious weaknesses? That's probably what the questions are going to be about. Be like, why are you doing, X company when you don't obviously have any experience in the space, or, and that's why you tend to have these dynamics where younger founders tend to work on consumer startups and older founders tend to work on enterprise companies, and ancient founders like myself, which try to work on things which are hard tech, because you're just coming into the space with more experience and that's why you pick enterprise companies. Whereas consumer, literally young founders are living kind of at the front edge of consumer and consumption, and therefore they sometimes have really interesting ideas.
How do YC partners feel about name dropping? You're like blah blah blah.
Oh, Ashton Kutcher is an investor in my company.
Yeah, that kind of thing.
I'm best friends with Qasar Younis.
That's a liability. So no, I think
that's just tired, bro. Nobody gives a shit.
Nobody gives. Yeah, exactly.
I think there is like sometimes a tasteful way to do it, where it's like, if someone's like very relevant and they're an advisor, and you're like, this person like knows this, in
like what?
Maybe.
Like what?
I don't know. Like,
give
let's
me an
say
example.
I'm trying to think of an example. Yeah, like
Immad's already an investor of my company and recommended me to YC. So
like that kind of thing, right? Especially if you were doing like I don't know, Mercury for Africa or something, and like you can, like, if it's very close to what you're doing and that person is like an expert and they're like giving you like a badge of confidence kind of thing.
I agree, but I think the more structural issues, you're going to try to jam this in an unnatural time in the conversation, and that's going to be more awkward. If it comes up naturally, that's another thing, but you're obsessed about getting this one point across, it might come across weird.
If you're leaving, if you're walking out of the interview and then you're like, by the way, Immad is an investor in my company, like, dude, just leave, just shut the door. Like, no.
Immad, Qasar, and Justin are personal friends. And, they gave me specific advice on this interview. And I feel like, so I think be careful. We're really trying to learn about the company and you, not about that stuff. Now, the better thing is actually take the thing that you learned from Immad, his insights about Mercury, and how is it going to apply to Africa. And if it makes sense, attribute it. But don't try to ram it in there, jam it in there, because literally, I mean, you might say, this person is an advisor, and the YC partner might think that person doesn't know what that company is actually doing poorly, and they're just good at raising money, and so it might work against you, more than you think sometimes.
It's the paradox of being a founder, and interacting with investors, right? Like, you don't want to be so thirsty, right? Unless like name dropping makes you sound like you're thirsty. And like, you want to be like, this shit is working. I'm going to work on this thing. You can join me and that'd be great, or not. Like, and I get it.
Yeah. So it used to be a big no-no to be a solo founder and go through YC. I think it's still a little bit of a red flag. How do you, if you are a solo founder and you're in this interview process, like, how do you portray yourself in a way that like comes across like positive and they want to still take that bet?
I mean, you should be able to answer the question why you're a solo founder. I mean, if you can't convince one other person by giving them half of your company to join you, that's a pretty big, that's a pretty red flag, because so much of building a company is recruiting. So if you can't recruit when you have all these chips on the table, what's going to happen when you're giving up much smaller slice of the company? and the company is, there's many YC companies, there are many funded companies. You're saying unicorn company. Being a unicorn company today is like being a seed company. It's like you could have a conference for unicorn companies, and it could fill an entire convention center. So it's not. So you have to have the ability to convince somebody, hey, you should get in this, get in the boat with me. And if you can't do that, that is a yellow red flag. Abstractly, there are lots of great companies with solo founders, but I think in the specific example of you in the interview, that's what I'm thinking about. What is deficient about them?
So what's a convincing answer? I mean, let's say you are a solo founder. Like, what can you say to say, okay, yes, but like this deficiency is not a big deal.
My name is Justin Khan. I built Twitch TV. And so it's like, you probably be so founder. They've done something really. I'd say that jokingly, but they've done something really impressive. And
or you're just
okay. This person's been around the block.
Yeah, you're building it, and you're like, hey, well, I just, I want to have a co-founder, but I just started building this, and we got a shit ton of customers, and so, I'm recruiting employees.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think too is there's a structural issue. Is rarely does one person possess both sides of the let's say the skills. You need to make it and you need to sell it, and rarely can people make it and sell it. They're usually good at one of the other, one of the two things, and that's.
Does it help? Does it help if you've already recruited a team? You're like, okay, I'm solo, but I've got 3 people, then they're committed.
For sure.
Yeah.
Like one tangible example is that I actually talked to a friend of mine yesterday, and he's has a company. He actually hasn't quit his job at a big fan company yet, but he has a company that's making $1 million a year. He's a solo founder. He's both an engineer and he as a subject matter expert in the space, and built this SaaS tool basically for the space, and he's just built it himself and his employees, and he's running it as a side business. He's doesn't even give a shit about raising funding or whatever, but that's someone I'm like, oh, I want to back your company,
Yeah, because he doesn't need you.
Exactly. He needs me so little that I'm on the outside trying to throw money in the window of his car, and he's rolling it up.
Yeah, and investors, this is what investors, they want to be at the beginning of the marathon. They want to put a sticker on your jersey. You won't see them as you slog through 26 miles. And at the other end, they're like, we were here for you the whole time. It's like, really?
That was me.
Yeah, mile marker 14 when I was vomiting. But yeah, let's all run through the finish line together.
They're like, we provided the jet fuel, baby.
Yeah, it's like, no, you provided a sticker, which actually slowed me down.
All right, we'll do one more question from Bashir. What if you've already raised a seed round? Does that mean you're in because you got this money already? YC should easily say yes to you, or does it not make a difference?
I mean, it does help, I think, actually. I bet, everybody would wish the answer is no, but I think it does help because it just shows you're able to do something. You're able to convince a bunch of other people that this is worth funding.
I agree. I think it certainly doesn't hurt you. It might be neutral, but I think in certain cases it helps, especially if they're good investors.
Unless your seed round was you sold 80% of your company for any amount of money, really. In which case that actually has happened. And then we were oh, we can't fund this company. And then or
recap it and talk to the seed investors, and it starts becoming annoying. And that happens more in international companies where Pakistan.vc, they're going to take 80% of that company. It's going to, but I don't think it's a bad thing. But so many questions are always around solo founders, and I always say find a co-founder, please. That's the best thing you can do.
Awesome. Yeah. There's literally 99 more questions, but we've hit our 1 hour, and I think we could keep chatting for a long time. But this was awesome. This is going to be recorded. I think anyone who is invited to the Zoom will get the recording, and we'll probably put it on YouTube or something afterwards as well.
Oh shit, this is recorded.
Yeah, it says it in the top left. Yeah, you got your whole setup, Justin. You sounded great. But anyway, thanks for your time. This was awesome. I think it was a lot of valuable content for everyone. And I guess we might do this again in 6 months or something. We'll see.
Down. Thank you guys. Take care. Cheers.
Goodbye.
Later. Bye, everyone.